We want to, and fondle her.
Exactly right.
Or
she fondles you, whichever one you want.
Do we want to distinguish just for a moment between the scare and the jump? Because I do think there's a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are two ways to approach it. The scare is easier, and it lasts, it's a shorter duration.
The jump is easier, sure.
Yes.
Right,
the scare.
Yeah.
The suspense lasts longer.
Right.
And it drives you, it makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
And the release is heaven sent. I think you use both. But you have to have a scare. You have to scare people. Keeping people in suspense is a little bit more difficult. You have to give information to the audience. You have to tell the audience ahead of the characters. In other words, Clive, there's somebody coming up behind you, but you don't see them. And they've got something they're going to plunge right into the top of your head and skewer your brain. But we know that, but you don't know that. So you're talking on and on about various things. And we start to feel, won't you just turn around and stop talking? That's suspense.
He tells it well, doesn't he?
We can lard it with scares and jumps later. We also have to decide here what area we're touching on that will be the big suspense thing. I mean, if this is a millennium movie, I mean, perhaps the theme should be millennialist. I mean, we touched on it before, that there should be something behind this.
A dark millennialist.
A dark millennialist movement, which both promises change, therefore we're excited because it's not banal, but equally is terribly unpleasant. So we have, because isn't this the secret of the suspense thing rather than the scare? We want it to happen, we want it to happen, we don't want it to happen, we don't want it to happen. And so I think behind these initial scenes that we've talked about, we should decide that there's something going on. There's
the plot.
The plot, that's what we need. Yes, right.
And we're missing something, I think, essential here. And I think human beings are most frightened of uncertainty.
Yes.
They're looking for certainty in life, in religion, in jobs, in work, in home. Everything comes to tell us tomorrow will be a lot like today. I can improve it, but I can depend on it. It's there. If I touch something, I know it's solid. I know that the sun will rise tomorrow. I know certain things will happen. Therefore, there's a rhythm to life. There's a certainty to life. And way down the line, maybe years from now, I'll deal with problems. But right now, everything is okay. Now, you add uncertainty, and I think people get very uncomfortable with it. And I think this is what the millennium represents to most people, is uncertainty.
See, I think that siding with the forces of anarchy, with the forces of disruption and darkness, may actually be a solution, and that the real terror of 2001 is that it will be like the movie. I don't mean that the movie is bland, but that the vision of the world of the movie is bland. That everything is antiseptic, that these are lives which are being lived in a very functional, robotic kind of way. And given the choice between the robot and the demon, I will choose the demon every time. I want to be the dark, sensual, fluid, protean thing, which I think human beings can be. And my major terror, when I was a kid and I watched Doctor Who, my terror of the Daleks was the terror of something which was soulless, that had no moral component whatsoever, and no imaginative component, that worked like a train worked along the same track. That seems to me to be so much more terrifying than your thing,
you can argue
which
with
can
the devil.
change. You can argue with the devil. You can probably
Not
even
with
get
a
laid by the
vacuum cleaner,
devil.
though.
You're talking about Republicans in the United States, Reaganites. That's what you're talking about, really. Those are the most terrifying
I'm in terror of Reaganites,
That's what you're frightened of most.
Well, maybe I am. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm scared of anything that
because
moves
they're
on the
so
same
frightened
track.
of what happened in the world, in the Western culture in the 60s and 70s. They're so frightened of sexuality and issues of like abortion and what it does, the kind of questions. That's what's tearing America apart right now.
I think maybe you're not so much frightened of the Reaganites as of the triumph of the Reaganites.
And if we, with Bush riding very high in the polls in the United States right now, the Reagan-Bush concepts will exist for a certain amount of time. So if you're talking about some theme of which to fear, and you want to make a horror film, there may be something to do with just 10 years from now, the triumph of this type of thinking in society, and maybe something comes against it. As you said, the demon comes against that. Anarchy maybe is preferable.
So then we've got Dionysus against Apollo.
Yeah, right.
And we've got something very, very interesting and classical going on.
And then the whole...
Well, I think we've also got essentially is something that would genuinely scare the audience, is which side it's going to root for.
Yes.
I think basically you've got to make the dark side genuinely appealing, as indeed it is. But for a change, you've got to celebrate it fully.
How do we make the dark side appealing? You see what
It's
we're...
not hard.
Well, it's not hard. That's
Well, now, wait a moment.
From what you're
Half
talking
an hour
about,
ago,
you're
you were...
talking about a whole regimented. I mean, it depends on what you're putting in opposition to it.
Well, if you're putting Darth Vader...
if what you're putting in opposition
Yes,
to it
precisely.
is, you know, a wonderful sunny world, and
Yep.
here is just this one awful thing. But if what you're putting against it is a world in which everything is under control, it's tightly controlled. People may be afraid of losing control, but you also don't want to live in a society in which you are in total control.
I think you have
We
to
keep avoiding
appeal
that.
to a universal emotion in people. Not their thoughts, but their emotions. You have to get down to their feelings.
Right.
It has to be universal. It has to work in India, it has to work in the United States, it has to work in Great Britain, it has to work everywhere, emotionally. A big monster that's scary, that walks through that door, we all react the same way. We talk about politics.
Well, we do,
I can
actually,
argue.
do we? I
The
don't
thing
know.
in the pit,
Uh-huh.
in your story, the thing that's down there, if it was real and it came out, I guarantee you, everybody at this table, we'd all run away from it. We would.
I wouldn't.
Ah,
I wrote it.
yes, it belongs to you.
Clive is claiming otherwise.
I am absolutely claiming
want
Well,
to
he'd go
embrace
shake his
the
hand. He'd
monster.
say, let's
right.
talk.
Yeah,
sure.
well, I
Yeah,
also,
yeah,
I
people wanna
also
talk
think
to
if the
it.
Archangel Gabriel appears through those doors
We'd
instead of
all
our
be
waiter,
terrified.
we'd also be terrified.
Every angel is terrifying. Yes.
Exactly. In other words, I think that the absolute forces for good, if rarefied and presented to us in some glowing celestial form, would scare the bejesus
Like
out of
beauty,
us.
you mean? You're talking about
Yes.
a beautiful,
I think,
perfect person
I
walked through
think-
the door that was scary? That's not scary.
oh, you're
But
kidding
then you
me.
go beyond terror into awe, don't you?
I'll disagree because I'm not a writer like all of you. I'm making movies that you have to show something visually that's scary.
Oh, sure.
Oh, but
Not here.
no,
Then
no,
what
no,
happens next?
no,
What
I'm,
happens next?
I did,
More,
Yeah, exactly.
more, and more, and more, and
Well,
more.
it'll be more of the same. though,
And
surely.
hopefully at the end, you know, you resolve it one way or the other. Either you don't resolve it, which is the most frightening of all. You can't resolve it.
Which
We're
is
sitting in the snow,
Sure.
and I don't know if Roger's a creature or a human, and I don't know if I am.
is there nothing,
Let's just sit around
But
while
that's
it's
much
we're gonna
scarier.
blow
But
torches
don't you
over
think,
that. That scares
but don't you
me.
think that's much
That-
scarier
No,
than
isn't
it
there-
would if you were sitting next
But
to
let
an
me tell
ugly
you something.
monster
But let me tell
that
you
was
something.
originally most
The
scary?
audience doesn't think that's scary because I've been through it. They get angry at that.
Huh.
They
And
want
one
to
thing.
know.
I had a research screening of the thing. I showed this film to a bunch of teenagers. And one teenage girl, 14 years old, she said,
Well, what happened in the end when the two men were sitting out in the snow?
and I said, well, that's part of the nature of the story. You have to use your imagination. And she said, oh, I hate that.
I pay you $5 for
Yeah.
You didn't tell me what to think.
The audience, whether it's in a motion picture or in a book, must participate with the artist. So part of it comes from the artist, and there's a feedback and a response from the audience. And that girl, I would hope, is a very minor, for all our sakes, a very minor point of the audience.
I think she's a growing part of the audience. I think that's part of the banality of the culture, part of the spoon-fed element of the culture. Young people are asked to use their imaginations less and less. And you know, in a way, we do a wretched thing to them. We teach them the reality of Santa Claus and Oz and Never Never Land up until the age of 5. And then we tell them at the age of 5, that was all lies. Here's the gross national project of Chile, you know. And we've got this very bland 1999 vision of the world, We've got a place in which imagination is being scoured, not just from the 5-year-old, but from the whole culture.
90% of the people in the United States believe in the supernatural, believe in God.
How many percent?
90.
90.
90%.